Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox. Welcome, Greens, to the channel. I wanted to kind of focus in kind of a different way in this video. Instead of being a match-by-match commentary, I wanted to do more of an overview and kind of look at my thoughts on just kind of how Sylvie works. And to my surprise, I actually ended up with a lot more, or maybe more detailed cons. They took up more space on my notepad, at least. But so first let's start with the pros. So obviously she helps tanky units stall. 25 defense and spirit isn't necessarily going to make a unit tanky. You really want a unit that probably has somewhere between 50 and 75 of one of those two stats, so that they can get raised up to the point where, you know, really you're forcing your opponents to have good penetrations to be able to do consistent damage to them. And you're also going to make it so that they can't rely on breaks. Now, breaks to defense and spirit aren't as common as they were. More modern units typically just have high penetrations and don't worry about breaking. But notable units like Helena, for example, can break spirit. This can prevent that. And there are a number of units that can break defense as well, but, you know, like the newer units usually aren't worrying about breaking defensive stats. They're more about, like, breaking elements or breaking damage types, that kind of thing. Her LB is pretty awesome, and so there's a couple of things that I want to mention about this, because this kind of power creeps all of the healing LBs that I've seen. And, you know, some of these units are kind of older, but for me, it's kind of interesting, for one, that when you have an LB heal, it actually costs AP, which is kind of strange. So, take Ayaka's heal, for example. It is a full diamond shape, just like Sylvie's. It is a 310 mod, just like Sylvie's. It dispels stop and gives 25% stop resistance for 3 turns. So, it has the same heal, and it does have an additional effect. It is the same AP cost. They are both 69 AP. Now, for Ayaka, being like a mage, straight up a mage, she's going to start with a lot of AP. That's not really going to bother her at all. Okay, so let's look at Aerith. I think Aerith is probably a lot closer to being in parity with hers. This is, again, a 310 mod. It is a smaller AoE. This is a cross instead of a diamond, so it's much smaller. It is not in parity in that way. But the 15 defense is actually, for 3 turns, is actually pretty relevant. If you think about that as like a 15% physical barrier for 3 turns, you could stack those 3 turns together and get kind of 45% physical barrier. Whereas her barrier is 50%, and it's physical and magical. So it is definitely power crept that a bit. Also, Aerith's LB is 58 AP, so it's a little bit cheaper. But, again, kind of a full mage, she's not really hurting for AP. Now, Sylvie has a lot of potential to be a damage unit. This is definitely in the pros, because I've seen her hit units for so much damage. And she has, like, Clever Paladin Strike, being able to get rid of auto revive, amazing, in a huge AoE, and it can also inflict slow, decent damage, and she can really buff herself to do pretty good damage. I mean, Aerith could too. She didn't necessarily have the AoE skills that this girl does. She didn't have the kind of the tech that this girl does in terms of offensive tech. But she could also do damage, and this is also true for her. But let's put a pin in that, because this kind of comes up in the cons, and it's something I'm going to have to wait out and see, but for right now, I'm not sure how I feel about her as an offensive unit. She won't, because of her... Okay, wait. So with the LB, she also has AP regen, which is notably something that neither of these other 2 units did. Now, she is more along like Red Mage 50% starting AP. She is not like full mage starting AP. Now, she's not really going to have AP problems because she's not super aggressive, especially if you kind of place her well on the map and keep her kind of out of the initial fight. She's going to use enough buffs and heals and stuff before she hits the front lines and starts hitting people that she's never really going to have AP problems, even if she blows 2/3 of her AP with her LB really early on. But that AP regeneration is going to help make up for that because it is still 2/3 of her starting AP. It is quite a bit. So it's good that it kind of helps that out. And that, I guess, could be a way that this is power creep, because it's weird in general that you're paying AP, because every other healing move is TP. So I guess this kind of makes sense. Maybe we'll see it more in the future. Because of her impressively high raw defensive stats, she tends to be a unit that, as I said in my stalling video, she's a unit that will often be ignored if there's another valid target around. People will save her for last, just because they can't do quite as much damage to her as they can to other units. And if there's a unit around that they do less damage to, it's probably the tank, which, if they're in range, probably has hate. So, just in general, people tend to target her last. So she's not really the unit that somebody's going to try to snipe from across the field in the same way that, like, Frederica likes to sharpshoot units out of existence. AoE reraise removal, I mean, I said it before, but this is kind of like, this is the same diamond pattern as Kotetsu, removes reraise. It does not break slash, however, it does provide slow. It's around the same mod. It doesn't have the weird hybrid damage mechanic. She has 2 dispels in her kit. Probably the most relevant is I'll Protect Everyone. Now, this also kind of comes up in my cons list, but I'll Protect Everyone is a really good, it dispels all buffs, it gets rid of any barriers that they have, and it gets rid of haste, and it gets rid of all of her debuffs, all at the same time from a range of 4, and it's dealing large damage to them, single target attack. So that's really good, and all of those things together, this will pick apart a tank. This will completely just de-tank a tank. It's pretty awesome, and it can be done at range, so that's pretty cool. Now, what I will say is that there are a lot of moves in here, especially Clever Paladin Strike, which you won't use as often at the back of your party because the AoE will generally potentially include some of your people, so she doesn't use this as much. Unless she gets out front and then just wipes everybody's re-raise in front of her, which can be interesting, but not something that I would necessarily recommend, because if she doesn't take everybody out, she's also probably going to go down. Because, again, she has enough defensive stats that most people won't pick on her first, but that doesn't mean that people can't take her out rather quickly, so you really don't want her getting up to the front. Which is why I definitely turn off Cheerful Paladin Strike. That's going to be my first con about her kit. It's her basic attack, and she will often use that to ping someone if she gets the opportunity, if she is kind of in that range. Now, she does have a lot of moves, other moves, including her 120 ability, which is pretty cool. And actually, I need to go back into the pros again, because her 120 move decreases defense penetration by 30, which is pretty cool. I mean, like, a lot of units are running like 30, 40, 60 defense penetration, so this can get rid of most, if not half of that, which is pretty cool and unique, and is definitely going to help with the physical tanks. It's definitely going to help, like, if she can get out in front and hit with this, it's definitely going to help her and Engelbert survive. And I think that she might actually, maybe, in a more defensive build, and unfortunately the better builds that I have for her right now are spirit based, because she can get up to 100 spirit with buffs because of her passive giving her HP and spirit, and HP is just generally helpful across the board. But if you went more for defense and speed and damage, you probably could build her as an offensive character. And as I've said, she has some great tech that she can get into, especially if you're going into re-raise heavy teams. If you get her out front attacking first, she definitely buffs really well, even getting to the front lines. Even then, it's just not going to be as much. And there are definitely ways, like Bladesoul as one of her sub-jobs. I put it actually on the cons list just because I think it will probably get her in trouble. Like, anything that's going to give her more options for damage is going to get her in trouble. Slate Riper is an even longer range dispel that also dispels haste. And physical and magical damage increases, which I don't think are that common when performing critical. There aren't really anything super long range, so actually this would make her more capable of dealing with people in close range. I think if I could get her up to 120 and get her to start using her 120 skill as she's getting, if she could wipe away some of that, she might actually be able to last, at least against more physical teams. I don't think it's obviously not going to help her with Elena or anything like that. But it could create a place where she could get in range enough to use some of this stuff. And, looking at it again, I think that Slate Wiper is actually probably better than, in some ways. I think I like it more because it has a little bit more range. Then I'll protect everyone in her main kit. If I were to run her that way, I would probably turn this off and use that for dispelling. It has the same range, I want to say, as True Paladin Strike. So, that actually could be an argument for Bladesoul. Again, it depends on how much her 120 ability and how much she's going to be using that consistently up front, and if that can help her survive, at least against physical teams. It's definitely, again, not going to help you with magical teams at all. I still think she would be very easy to counter kill if you put her up front. For that reason, I think that in the pro side is her white mage sub-job. Now, the one sad thing about this is that she didn't get Curaga, because by the time this video goes up, probably, we're going to have the new Curaga, and that thing is just awesome. That would be pretty amazing in her kit. White mage would definitely dominate. She would be probably, I think that could push her into being overpowered. If she had Curaga in her white mage kit. But she does have full life, and she does have Curata. And if you team her up with durable enough units, which is what her supporting abilities really support, I think you actually can very easily work off Curata, for sure. But that is also a con in that, unless we're talking about Cura, or unless we're running her own Bunny Loving Knight sub-job, she doesn't have a good AoE heal. Now, Healing Prayer is kind of like what Curaga is right now as I'm filming this, but not by the time you watch this video. It is just that regular cross shape 210, but it also increases her magic by 40%. Now, running her with Elena, this is, depending on your thoughts on Stella Maris, this might be redundant. And, typically it doesn't really help. Like, cross-shaped heals just don't do it for me, in a lot of ways, and this just didn't, on certain teams that need this, if they somehow group up, but I don't, look, if units need to be healed, I don't want them grouped up enough that they're about to get slain by the next AoE either. So really, I want diamond-shaped heals, if I can get them, and her LB does provide that. Even though she usually uses it at the first opportunity, when it's going to be overkill for healing and may only hit one character. But, that is kind of a con of her LB. Crippling Strike, it's so close range, and decrease healing power, I don't get it. I guess against certain teams, if it's sustain versus sustain, if you're trying to have her counter herself, this would be crippling on her. It would be crippling against another Sylvie. But I don't see the point. And maybe it is a part of the 120 build that I'm missing as a part of this showcase. Maybe, you know, the key really is for her to stop defense penetration, for her to be survivable and her to be kind of more of a brawler than she is. But I just don't think that she has the survivability to really get that close to do that. And that's that kind of close range stuff. That's the majority of what the Bladesoul subjob is. Eventually, when the barrier gets bigger, that could be really interesting for her, though. But I think that's a while in advance of when this video is going to come out. Let me look more into my cons, because I've definitely got through all the pros. There weren't that many. Aggression is probably her last priority in a lot of cases, but there definitely are times when there's no one to heal and everyone has had their buffs applied to them. Especially if you turn off Prayer of Resolute Oaths, which is going to be kind of her main buff, and also, this is also on the cons list, she can kind of get lost in running around and trying to give that buff to everyone on the team. And if your team is built so that this buff is integral and that's what you want her to do, that can be fine, but it can also kind of have a Stellaris problem, and anybody who's run Elena knows what the Stellaris problem is and why there are certain maps that you absolutely turn Stellaris off. She will get lost buffing in one place, especially if you start her out in a corner, you know, and there's a lot of really great units that do this. I'm not necessarily saying that this ruins her as a unit. You know, Velis has the same problem, and I think that they're both going to end up being kind of great rainbow healers, rainbow supports, potentially. You know, she really could take Velis's place in a lot of ways. She can also heal Spiral in that if she's at full health and somebody is near her and she's the only person around, there's no one to heal, no one to buff. I'm not sure if she'll use full life in this scenario if possible, but probably not. She will generally attack. But if she takes some damage, instead of trying to finish that person off, she will try to heal herself, and she will heal Spiral a la anybody who's ever played Yuna. 50% AP start is really low for a mage. Again, if you have her staying in the back, this is probably fine. But, okay, so here's one of the wrinkles that I see in trying to use her as a really offensive unit, right? Because if there is some healing to do, she will do it, which is great. That's exactly what you want on a healer that can do offensive stuff. You want her to know when to heal. But think about it this way. If she's not working her way through your group, getting off supportive buffs and healing from the back, then she's not building up AP. And if she, you know, throws, say, 33 AP into a clever paladin strike, right? Then she has maybe enough AP to cast her LB, and then after that, she's on the front lines, but she doesn't have any AP left except for the little amount that she's regenning per turn, and she's kind of in a bad spot. True Paladin Strike, which is, again, I think the thing that might be able to make her durable enough to survive on the front lines, and again, only if she hits everybody with it. Like, if there's a defense penetration unit that's in the back and she hits the tank with this, who usually don't have defense penetration, it's not really going to be relevant in keeping her alive. So, again, I really don't, at this point, see her being a frontline unit, which is kind of unfortunate because it's weird. She has oddly low survivability compared to what her stats and what her buffs would really lead you to believe. It is truly strange. And again, maybe that improves with the increase in stats going into 120. I don't know. With her heals, all of her heals, with the exception of her LB, like a lot of healers, like a lot of mage healers, except for, like, you know, arithmeticians, that kind of thing, all of these have a cast time. Kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. Not every unit's perfect. And really, even though I think that there are more cons and more that I would say about her in the negative, it's a lot of those things are smaller complaints, and a lot of the things that she's doing on the pro side are really unique and really powerful. So overall, I think this is a pretty great unit. I'm really curious what the 120 is going to bring to this, how good that True Paladin Strike would be, how often she's going to use that first, because I think, again, that's really what it's going to take for her to be able to survive. And also kind of playing around with other units, because she definitely has potential to work with a lot more than just Engelbert and Elena, but, you know, supporting them from behind, they are durable enough that they can stall for a long time with her support. So they tend to be effective, they tend to win, but, and this should be here by the end of this video, but I did run into an Oops All Supports light team that absolutely kicked my ass, that had her running up front, and she just bodied her other half. She one-hit herself with clever Paladin Strike, removed her own auto-revive, and that was it for my Sylvie. Like, she basically was able to do nothing, she got baited up to the front, and then wiped. So that match went really bad for me. So as you can see, it's certainly not a case of she's just broken good and this is a must pull, even for light players. But I think if you are a dedicated light player and you want another cool unit with unique capabilities to play around with that might actually potentially be a lot better into the future depending on what kind of things come out, what kind of units come out, that she can more properly support. Also, when Engelbert's monk buffs get in, when he gets the ability to do a fixed AoE heal with regen, I think that's going to be really powerful with her. So she is a unit that's probably going to be good in the future, but the other thing about that is, I mean, that we're beyond the guild pulls now, so nothing you can do about that, unfortunately. And, you know, if you are that kind of light player, sure, you should have been doing them anyways, even if you weren't going to pull her. But with these latest global exclusive units, with the last several, their challenge boards keep coming back, so there's not necessarily a reason that you have to pull this unit on banner. Honestly, for most people, I would definitely recommend skipping this unit right now. It might become the case by the next global exclusive unit, especially if we're getting global Shadow Links pretty soon, that she has a more relevant place in the meta than she does right now, or a less limited place, or maybe more interesting people to play with. And, you know, by the time Shadow Links comes out, you could try to fucking pull for Sylvie if she's still what you want, or you could go for Links. But I think there's a lot of things to save for, and while I definitely found this unit interesting enough to talk about for close to a fucking hour this afternoon, she's definitely, like, not a must-pull for everybody. But she is absolutely a unit to keep your eye on into the future. She could be absolutely broken. She's probably really stupid with snow or something like that. God, her Snow and Bellis just stall everything. That would be so weird. And she wouldn't even have to be like the main healer, so she could actually, oh no, this is just, this feels wrong. Okay, I'm done. That's it. It's over.